Joining us from today. I'd like to welcome you to our DPsych Counselling Psychology webinar. We're joined by Richard Golsworthy, the programme lead, who I'm sure some of you have had some interaction with already. He's just going to talk us through a short presentation, and then it's an opportunity for you to ask any questions you might have about the programme or about GCU. So please feel free to type in the box. Just a short message around the fact that we will be recording this webinar to send out to anyone who can't make it. So yes, it will be recorded. I hope you enjoy, and please, feel free to ask any questions you have throughout. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Hannah. Welcome everyone. It's a bit odd, I can see myself, but not any of you. So I think I'm just going to hide myself, probably. That's better. I've got a bit of a heavy cold, so excuse me if I need to stop at any moment, anytime, just a cough. And it'll be a very brief presentation because really the main purpose here is just to hear any questions that you might want to ask and respond to those. Congratulations on obtaining a place on the programme. It's been an exceptionally tough year, I think, this year for applicants. So you've done exceptionally well to get on the programme. So you're anticipating and looking forward to a start in late September. And I guess I can give you a very brief sort of overview of sort of what's going to be happening once you're here and over the programme. Obviously, the full-time programme is 3 years. We have been able to reinstitute a part-time option from the first year, which we haven't had for the last few years. So I don't know if any of you have applied for the part-time route. It wasn't widely advertised in advance because it's only just been approved very recently. There is the potential to undertake the programme part-time as well as full-time. Get in touch with myself or Heather McIntyre, the programme coordinator, if actually you're interested in shifting. When you come into the programme, there's some induction activities in the sort of week 1 of trimester A-1, and then we get into in the first week is quite an intensive week of teaching, an introduction to various different modules, and we want to get you started in particular quite strongly with the practice side of things, in particular person-centered therapy practice. So you've got quite a strong intensive block over the first trimester of PCT training, and some of that is theory, some of that is practice in groups of 3, supervised practice in groups of 3 amongst yourselves, together with the cohorts from the sport and exercise doctoral program and the health psychology doctoral program. So it's quite a lot of training which you'll undertake alongside those 2 rather smaller cohorts of students. We typically have an intake in this program of sort of between 26 and 30. They typically have an intake of about 10. So it's quite large groups, but also the opportunity then to sort of move around to experience or understand the sort of some broader perspectives of practitioner psychology practice, not simply our own. And we found there's a lot of value that comes out of that. So where was I? Coming into fairly intensive practice-oriented work. A lot of that takes place on a Thursday on the full-time program. Teaching through trimester A and B is mainly on Thursdays and Fridays, apart from, I think it was 2 intensive weeks in the week 1 of trimester A and trimester B. You don't have any teaching through the summer, but you are on placements from around hopefully December time through till September, October of the following year in your stage 1 placement. Some students are later into placement than that. Some students are earlier, particularly if you have a qualification in person-centered therapy already, then sometimes you might get into placement practice rather sooner. What that hinges on primarily is undertaking what we call a readiness to practice assessment, which sort of does what it says on the tin. It's very different from fitness to practice. If you've kind of come across that phrase, which is a is a phrase which comes from the Health and Care Professions Council, our regulator, about our well-being, our health, our capacity to practice, whereas readiness to practice in the program is about you having undertaken the sufficient training and be sufficiently aware of sort of ethical and professional concerns for your practice. So as an assessment of that at some point during trimester A. And so if you have coming into the program with pre-existing qualifications in person-centered work, then that might happen fairly quickly. Assuming you're not, which is usually the case for most students, then that will happen towards the end of trimester A. Alongside that sort of placement, practice and sort of placement orientation, of course, you'll be getting on with a range of other activities as well. In particular, you'll need to hit the ground quite fast in terms of research, because there's a very quite an intense research component in stage 1 of the program, beginning with a systematic review, but also alongside that an empirical project which you undertake in trimesters B and C in stage 1. So there's 2 research modules during this year. One is called analytical methods, which is the kind of how-to. It's similar to MSc or modules in psychology MScs in many places. So it's the fundamentals of sort of postgraduate study in psychology in terms of how we think about research, building on skills you'll have gained within undergraduate psychology programs. And there's a couple of assessments associated with that. Then there's the main dissertation module, which comprises, as I said, a systematic review and an empirical project. So it's going to be busy in terms of research. And alongside that, in trimester A and early trimester B, you've got a module called critical inquiry in counselling psychology, wherein you have, I think it's 2, is it 2 or 3? I think it's 2 assignments, which are more about the sort of principles and practice of counselling psychology specifically. So that's not a shared module, that's a counselling psychology module. Going through the modules, just to sort of tick them off, there's the critical inquiry in counselling psychology that I just mentioned, advanced research in applied psychology, that's a shared module with the other 2 programs. There's empirical, what does it call it? Analytical methods, which is also a shared module. There's applied psychology practice 1 skills, which is your sort of skills practice module for learning person-centered therapy, and also applied psychology practice skills theory, which is just does what it says on the tin and introduces more of the theoretical aspects to practice. And lastly, but not least, professional development in applied psychology. Although that's a shared module, you won't see other students, generally speaking, within that module, as it's to do with supervision and personal development groups within domains. So you'll be working with your cohort of counselling psychology trainees, and the assessments for that module come right at the end of the year. It's a module that spans the full year. So for the current year, we're anticipating submissions in the next 2 to 3 weeks, one of which is a reflective essay, which is about your learning across the year in its entirety, and the second is a professional practice logbook, a detailed account of your learning on placement practice in the year. I think that's probably enough from me, just to give you a sense of what the year looks like. I hope it's not too overwhelming. And I'm very happy to sort of open the floor to address what I imagine might be lots of questions that you have. And one already from Yusuf: how does supervision work in the program? How often do I meet? And what's the process of selecting a supervisor? So first of all, Yusuf, I need to ask, are you talking about practice supervision for placement work, or are you talking about research supervision. You can type or speak, whatever's quicker. Maybe I should, practice replacements. Okay. So we have a list of supervisors. Some placements provide supervision. Some placements do not. Some placements, just to make things a little confusing, provide supervision, but in some way, but it's not sufficient in quantity, or it's not a supervisor of who we would recognise on the programme, which is kind of unfortunate, but occasionally that happens, not so often, to be honest. So if you're fortunate, you'll have supervision within your placement, provided by the placement, which is free to you and happens usually weekly or fortnightly. We'd expect really fortnightly to be a minimum. Was a ratio across stage 1 of 1 to 6 in terms of client hours to supervision, or supervision to client hours. That doesn't mean, let's say you have one client to begin with, you've only got one client a week. It doesn't mean you only have supervision once every 6 weeks. That's a minimum ratio, and we expect you to have supervision ongoingly to discuss your practice, even if that's only with one client. So a sort of minimum expectation would be to have an hour a fortnight, but that may increase depending on the placement itself, whether it's internal or external, and how many clients you've got, obviously. But yeah, if you have external supervision, which if your placement provider doesn't provide you with supervision, then you'll need to find your own external supervisor. And so the minimum we'd expect with a sort of minimum caseload of clients would be an hour a fortnight. We provide a list of potential external supervisors. You can also potentially find your own, as long as they're suitable from our point of view. But generally speaking, I'd probably suggest staying with the list that we have. I think that answers your question. How often will we? What's the process selected? Yeah. When should we start applying for placements? What supports after our placement? How long does it take? Thank you, Sharon. So once we'll get placement lists for you to start applying to very soon after you come onto the program. We'd expect you hopefully to be starting placement around December, but as I said earlier, it can be later than that, but you want to get in as soon as possible, kind of from December. December for most students, unless you have a pre-existing qualification in PCT, then December is usually the earliest point, and often just because of Christmas and the holiday, that turns into January in terms of seeing clients. Like you might have a week or two of induction prior to Christmas, perhaps, and then hopefully get started with seeing clients in January. So sort of two sides of the coin here. So we provide you with some support to find placements, but we expect you to find your own placement. So that sounds a bit contradictory, I know, but part of that is we don't want to limit you to people who might suggest. You may be working somewhere where already in a relevant place of work where you think that can be an effective placement, and we wouldn't want to stop that from happening if it's suitable to you and it kind of fits our requirements. So you can bring that to our attention. We can have a discussion with the placement or with the organisation and see if it's possible to do some placement work there. Or you may have links through previous work or through other colleagues or people you know of potential placements which are not on our list but are perfectly effective and acceptable potential placement organisations for us, for a stage 1 student. So again, we don't want to limit you in that regard. We want to encourage you to make use of those kind of contacts. So we want you to be actively engaged in trying to find placements. You'll have been asked about this, I imagine, at an interview. And of the list that we can provide, bear in mind this is a competitive process. So we don't allocate you to placements. You can apply to whatever placements we put up on the list. There's not hundreds. but you can apply to wherever you want. But bear in mind that others will be applying to, a selection of those as well, and whether you're offered a place will depend on interview. So we think this is a good process because it's much like applying for a job and sets you up very effectively, having had to apply for placements over the 3 years of the program for applying to work in the future. So yeah, you'll be applying for placements in around September time, May or start of October. You'll have support from we have 3 placement tutors who will work with you in doing that, as well as Heather McIntyre, our program coordinator. And yeah, we'd hope to get most of you in placement by Christmas. Eva or Ava. So yeah, there's a list, a practitioner list. Sort of within reason, you can choose your own supervisor. We need to kind of sign off on them and make sure they're appropriate. But yes, we're not going to put barriers in the way if you have someone who is suitably qualified. There do need to be an accredited professional, ideally a counsellor psychologist, but they don't have to be a counsellor psychologist. We do suggest there's a requirement that I can't remember quite how it's phrased, and it's deliberately a little bit vague. I think it's something like a majority of your supervision over the program should be from a counsellor psychologist, or maybe it's even not as strong as that. It might be a significant proportion. So it's quite vague, but the thing is, particularly in the latter stages of the program, it's really important, as you're going to be counsellor psychologists, that you have supervision from that from someone in that position. It's very different from having supervision from, on the one hand, say a clinical psychologist, or on the other hand, from a counsellor or a psychotherapist. So answering Paul's question at the same time, yes, a BACP accredited supervisor is suitable for stage 1 placement practice, but you'd want to make sure in later stages of the program that you also have supervision from a counsellor psychologist. It's good to change supervisors anyway. We wouldn't expect you to have the same supervisor throughout the program. And someone who's suitable to supervise person-centered practice in stage 1 may not be suitable to supervise CBT practice or more broad-based counselling psychology practice in other stages. Yes, there is a list of practitioners as well. Sorry, Yihan, I'm not sure which is your first name, if it's Gal or Yihan, so my apologies. Paid or virtual placements, both are fine. You'd be, unless you're already in a post which pays you, and that is acceptable as a placement, then you're very unlikely to have a paid placement in stage 1. We do have some paid placements in the program. Most of these are in stage 3. I think there might just about be 1 or 2 in stage 2, but yeah, primarily in stage 3. But yeah, you're very unlikely to find a paid placement in stage 1. Virtual placement, over the course of the full program, we expect you to gain well, actually, it would be fine if all your placements are in person, but we expect a minimum of 50% to be in person, which means you can have up to 50% in terms of online or telephone practice. From our point of view, obviously, COVID completely changed the sort of nature of business in this regard for all practitioners. And so part of your early training is on working online, working on the telephone, as well as working in person, and we'd see this as kind of fundamental and essential in in modern practice. We would be negligent really not to be focusing on that. So yes, it's certainly possible to have virtual placement experiences. When I say virtual placement, in some placements you might be undertaking online practice, but you need to be in the placement organisation to do that. Whereas for other placements, you might be working from your home or wherever your chosen place, as it were. I've answered Paul's question. Priya, on the part-time course, what would the timetable look like? In general, let me get this right. So it's in stage 1, it's Fridays in the first year on the part-time route, and Thursdays for the second year. I think for the intensive weeks, I don't have the timetable in front of me, so I can't be absolutely certain about that. It'd probably be a little bit of both, because basically on the part-time route, you don't undertake any practice in the first year of that stage, and so Fridays are sort of more theoretical days, and you'd come to that in first year. You wouldn't undertake a placement. Then in second year, you'd probably attend more of the intensive week, but you might still need to attend some of the intensive week in the first year, because I think there might be some research in it. You'd attend the practice-oriented parts of the intensive week, and then the Thursdays ongoing. So in the part-time route, the first year of stage 1 is fairly light. The second week a bit more intense, because you've got placement and practice work as well, usually 2 days a week. Catherine, is there an option to attend the talk classes online? No, there's no option to attend any classes online. It's all in person only. So you need to come onto campus regardless of where your placements are arranged. We do have people, and always have had people, who've commuted from other parts of the UK, even from Ireland, both Ireland and Northern Ireland, from London, from Aberdeen, from Inverness. So people do commute, as it were, to attend the teaching in the university, and then set up placements in nearer to home, so that part of their week is at home. We obviously, depending on where you are in the country and whether we've had any relationships previously with placement organisations, we may or may not be able to support you in setting up a placement there. But yeah, we will pass on any knowledge we have and help with if we have had a student. So, for example, from Aberdeen, we've had quite a number of students attending from there. So we have relationships with at least a couple of placement providers there, and can readily set up placements. If you're coming from somewhere where we haven't had that experience, then you'll need to source your placement for yourself with our support. Elise, is it possible to share the requirements for a suitable placement? Sure. So it has to be a placement or an organisation, a practice organisation, which provides contracted psychological therapy or counselling to the public, or to a subsection of the population. And I guess what that means is it rules out sort of drop-in centres, places where it needs to be, the term contracted psychological therapy, I think is a significant one, because it implies a certain kind of relationship between the organisation and their client group, and how that client group enter into a sort of an enduring process of therapeutic practice with a group of practitioners, whether those are qualified or student practitioners. And that enduring time might be a very short enduring time. Some organisations might only offer, say, 4 to 6 sessions, whereas others, it might be open-ended. But nevertheless, it's a contracted therapy of either a set length or an open-ended length. So that's the first requirement. The second requirement is that you need to have what we'd call a placement educator, and the placement educator is the person who essentially manages the placement. They have to be within the organisation itself, and they don't have to be accredited as we don't have to meet quite the same requirements as a supervisor, but they are typically a counsellor, a psychotherapist, a psychologist, perhaps a GP, perhaps a social worker. And the bottom line, the thing they need to share, is the ability and capacity to take clinical responsibility for your placement work. So unless there is an internal supervisor who takes that. So the reasoning here, or the reason for this, is that many placements, especially in stage 1, have external supervisors. The external supervisors supervise your work, but they don't know they can't know many details about your clients. They don't have the capacity to act independently in a case of urgency, like if someone is suicidal or a threat to another person. Your supervisor has very limited capacity to act if they're external to the placement. So your placement educator or an internal supervisor is the person who has what we'd call final clinical responsibility for your work, because they can take action in any situation of urgency, or where people need to be contacted, or action taken, which as a student you have obviously responsibilities, but also you're learning, and we would expect that there is an educator or supervisor who will support you and actually take over in situations of risk, for example, particularly in stage 1. So yeah, the placement educator, unless there is an internal supervisor taking clinical responsibility, has to be able to take clinical responsibility for your caseload, and that does rule out some organisations who don't have that capacity. For example, if they might have qualified practitioners, but maybe they're sessional workers and they're not in a position to be able to take on that placement educator role. So I think those are the main requirements. Obviously, they need to have reasonable throughput of clients to be able to bring, make sure that you have clients, and we need to support you in your role. As your manager or placement educator, they need to be able to provide sort of adequate support to you in the role of trainee counselling psychologist. I think that's about it, Elise. You will receive a placement handbook, either at the start of the programme or shortly before, which gives you a lot more detail about these kind of things. But there's no particular rush, because, as I said, you're not going to be starting placement until much later in the year, probably December at the earliest. So you don't need to rush things at this point in terms of getting a placement, although if you have ideas about that or thoughts about that, you can certainly get in touch with people in placement or potential organisations to ask if they'd be willing to offer a placement. What we do ask is you don't it's very unusual for NHS services to offer stage 1 placements, and you shouldn't contact NHS services kind of off your own bat, just because they have their own kind of protocols and ways of doing things, and it tends to be quite poorly received when our students just get in touch on their own behalf rather than through the programme. There's a lot more I could say about the reason for NHS placement, not having NHS placements in stage 1, but I think now's not really the necessary time for that, and there's lots of other questions. Sumaran, would a virtual placement based out of the UK, e.g. India, be acceptable? For the 50, so 2 parts to that question. So first of all, you need to have a spread of placements across the programme. So it wouldn't be you have 50 hours in one placement, or 50% in one placement. You'd have to have more placements than that. In terms of the stage 1, then yes, placements outside the country. It depends on insurance. It's not, I would say it's probably not impossible. We would need to sort of look into the detail of that rather more. It's technically an international placement, even though you'd be based here. So yeah, it's a complex question, but you're welcome to sort of bring it to our attention at the start of the programme, and we can look into the potential for that. I think it has happened before, so theoretically it should be possible. It's not terribly easy to set up. We have to go through a bit of a more stringent process for verifying the suitability of the placement, because we don't have some of the sort of checks and balances that we know are in place within the UK, for example, but it certainly has happened before. Gunying Pan, what are the requirements for the suitable therapist for personal therapy? Is a list available? I think we do have a list of possibilities, but essentially we leave that very much to you. We strongly recommend that you choose sorry, we strongly recommend you choose someone who is an accredited practitioner, so maybe UKCP accredited, or BACP accredited, or a counselor psychologist, so HCPC registered. There is some confusion on different registers of professionals between someone who's registered and someone who's accredited, and you always want the sort of highest level of qualification. We don't insist on that because we think really, by and large, you as trainees are best placed to decide what is most appropriate for you. And certainly, speaking personally, it wasn't during my training, but after my training, I had some incredibly valuable therapy, much more useful than my therapy during my training. In fact, I had very useful therapy after my training with someone who didn't have any qualifications, or sorry, they had qualifications, but a very different pathway, weren't accredited with or registered with sort of standard counselling organisations. So certainly from my point of view, we have a reasonable openness to consider quite a wide range of possibilities, but it needs to be based in something reasonably similar to what you're practicing in. So, for example, I think it wouldn't be suitable to have, say, a sort of dance movement therapist as a personal therapist, because this is, although maybe exciting and interesting, it's maybe more of a sort of personal interest or a post-qualification interest rather than something which is directly relevant to the practice that you're going to be carrying out. So it's essentially talking therapy that we're thinking about. Similarly, perhaps psychodrama or other things like that, which, although potentially very, very useful, it's perhaps very different from the kind of work that you'll be doing over the program, and we want something which both supports you and is reasonably similar to that. And so, yeah, we have some flexibility, not endless flexibility. Recommend that the person is accredited or at the sort of highest level of registration with whatever their accrediting body is. They don't have to be PCT, although it's quite helpful perhaps to be PCT in first year, but note if you have a different preference, if there's something particularly you want to work on, you think a different modality is more helpful, then that's entirely up to you. There's a form, a kind of optional form, which you can get signed off by your placement tutor, one of three people, Alex, Janelle and Erin. And this is an optional form which basically is saying, the placement tutor is saying, I've looked at this personal therapist and verified that they're suitable for the program. So this is a helpful form from your point of view, in that it's a verification that we've said that we're very happy with this personal therapist and happy to accept the hours that you do with them. It's not mandatory, and if you're choosing someone who's an accredited with a BACP or a counselling psychologist, then you don't really need to bother with that. It's just for your peace of mind, if you want that, to know that we're happy with them. Where am I? Lydia. Woodworking as a student counsellor, counselling acceptable placement. We have a few placements in student counselling services, so yes, that certainly should be fine, as long as the previous things that I've talked about are met. Priya, what are the dates for the course to start? Exact dates, I'm not sure. You can find the trimester dates on the webpage, on the main GCU website. It's toward, I think it's the last week of September is perhaps week 1. So the week before that will be an induction week, and possibly the week before that, maybe international induction week, but you can check the dates on the webpage. Reading list, yes, there will be a reading list, and you'll be sent that at some point. Probably before the start, I'll ask Rosie, who is the current coordinator for stage 1, to send out a couple of things. Yusuf, reading list, just to say, they generally come by module rather than by year. So I'm not sure if Rosie would send out just a few sort of starter texts, or direct you to more to sort of modular information. fill them health declaration screening, that kind of thing. I imagine they are inundated, so it may take a bit of time. I think if there was anything that was, potentially a concern to you, like you thought, you were expecting to hear something specific from them, then I would follow it up. If, from your point of view, everything looks, should be no problem, should be straightforward, then I think I would just leave it, and I'm sure you'll hear back eventually. Is there a requirement to be there during induction week? It would be very disadvantageous, I think, not to be there during induction week, because there's various different induction activities, both sort of university level, in terms of a library and just orienting yourself to how the place works, as well as the program induction. The program induction is a day basically, so it's not the full. Induction week isn't the full week. Simran, is there anything I can do to prepare for the research components of the program? I don't think so, really. I mean, most students sort of come into some kind of research framework that exists, or research proposal that exists, with particular supervisors. If you've got a very strong desire to, you have a very strong idea about a research direction, then you can certainly discuss that, and usually we'll be able to match you with someone, try and support those kind of requests, assuming we feel we're able to adequately support and supervise those requests. Sometimes students are a bit over optimistic about what is achievable. Bear in mind, this is not a PhD, and the research that you undertake is relatively small scale, just in terms of the time span. So you've got a research, the major research components, as I said before, in stage one, you've got a literature, a systematic review rather, and an empirical project. You've got a matter of months to undertake this empirical project, so it can't be over ambitious. You've got another empirical project to undertake in stage three, which can be perhaps a little bit more ambitious, but it's again, it's over the course of stage three alone. So again, it's sort of reasonably limited in scope. When you start the program and you get the module guide for the ARAP 1 module, Advanced Research in Applied Psychology, then you'll see a list of supervisors, and the supervisors will highlight the particular research projects, particular areas of interest, and you can kind of align yourself to one of these, or this, you actually need to, I think, pick a list of 3 and prioritize them, and then the module leadership tries to sort of match students with supervisors as best as possible. Sean, how many research projects do we complete throughout the program? So in terms of empirical projects, 2, one is stage 1, one is stage 3. You've also got the 2 systematic reviews, one is stage 1, one is stage 2, and the other component of stage 2, basically you're doing the detailed project proposal in stage 2, which you then go out on to carry out in stage 3. So each unit sort of technically stands alone, but also like each module. So what you do in stage 1 isn't necessarily linked to what you do in stage 2. What you do in stage 2 isn't necessarily linked to what you do in stage 3. But because they're marked within that module and stand alone. But having said that, if you, for example, you do a detailed project proposal in stage 2, obviously you want that to be the thing you're going to do in stage 3. You don't really want to start from scratch, because you've prepared that proposal in order to get going quickly in stage 3. So they do link together, and most typically all 3 years link together in some way as different sort of subcomponents of an overarching research area. So in stage 1, the systematic review and the empirical project are tied together, and you actually write you're part of the final submission, because they're submitted as one assignment, is a sort of overview of the sort of learning achieved from undertaking both these assignments. So I'm mentioning that because when, who was it? Sean is asking about how many projects and having a topic. I guess it depends on the nature of the topic you have in mind, but ideally, you want quite a broad topic which can actually has the volume or the strength to support potentially quite a range of different components within it. Having said that, people do change topics. So what you do, you might do something in stage 1 and then decide, I've really had enough of that, and I'm going to start something completely different for my systematic review in stage 2, and then the empirical project moving from stage 2 and stage 3. But yeah, so that's possible, but a lot of students do select something which sort of the broad the broad theme of the project takes them through all components of the 3 years. Ava asks, yes, you can choose whether the project is qualitative or quantitative. Obviously, that depends on the nature of the research question. Is I guess the main thing. And it's helpful, I think, if you're doing quantitative in 1 year to maybe shift to qualitative in stage 3. But we don't have hard and fast rules about that. Oh, take a breath, have a sip of coffee. Although it's a bit cold after talking for 40 minutes. Mary, so okay. So I can't offer a very detailed answer to that, but we have a significant student support service and disability service where with a student with needing any kind of extra support or consideration, we'd encourage them to engage with that service. One of the things that is considered is the nature of the difficulty and what support might be needed. That's then translated into what we call a RAP, which is a recommended adjustments page, and that is fed back to module leaders to indicate the kind of additional support or and sometimes that's about extra time. There's a range of sort of possibilities with that, I guess. So I can't talk about the specific support about dyscalculalia as a problem in itself, but I can say that the support services are there, and I'm sure you're not the only person who experiences that and who's needed support from the university with that. So I imagine there are people who are more knowledgeable than I am about that. Anything else? Good to see you have lots of questions. Thank you. Abby, yes, you will receive a timetable fairly soon, and I can't say exactly when that will be, but I will check back with Heather just to make sure that's going to happen in the near future. Yeah, I think it's usually around the start of August. Ava, is there a middle qualification we get through? Yeah. So no, there's not. If you, we have 3 early exit points of the program. So if someone decides to leave because it's not for them, or if you fail any single assignment twice, then it leads to the exit from the program. You have 2 attempts at each assignment. Hopefully that doesn't sound too alarming. You do get quite a lot of support with the second attempt, including we can look at a draft. So it's rare, very rare that happens. But where people leave early, then if you've completed the whole of year 1, stage 1, we usually refer to stage rather than year because of the part-time route being more than a year. So if you leave having completed the whole of stage 1, then you'd leave with an MSc in psychological counselling, I think it's called. If you amend, there's a PG Cert and a PG Dip as lesser qualifications if you leave within or after year 1, but without having completed the full year. But those exit awards are only available at program exit. You don't get them during the qualification. You only have the doctorate at the end of the 3 years full time. And it used to be the case that the BACP would, once students had gained 100 hours of practice, would enable you to register with them, and that could enable students to get jobs. We didn't allow you just to open your own private practice on that basis when that happened, but yes, it was helpful to students because it helped them to obtain work. Unfortunately, the BACP closed down that route for various reasons known to themselves, so you can only actually gain BACP registration once you've undertaken the full 3 years. I'm not sure quite what the situation now is for people who exit with an MSc. I think you'd have to. I'm sure you could get registration at some point, but it would be a bit more of a process than it used to be. So the bottom line, kind of regardless of that, is you can't do some of the program and then undertake your own private practice. You have to complete the full program. Anything else? Well, Lauren, will it be possible to see some research projects that? Yes, but probably not till we start. You'll get a clear outline of all of that information very early on in the program, but it won't be before you're, I think, in and registered in the program. It might happen slightly before week 1, possibly, because I know you can register for the program or register and access modules within the program, I think, a bit before week 1. I'm not 100% sure exactly the date of that, but yeah, I'll be around the start of the program. Bradley asks about the recording. Thanks, Hannah, you've got that. Is it possible to attend the course full-time in year 1 and change to part-time? Yes, we do. Whether this flexibility will continue long term, I'm not 100% sure, but we have always and continue at the moment to offer flexibility as long as you complete. Sorry, excuse me. Yeah, you can complete stage 1 full-time and then move to part-time in stage 2 and then move back to full-time in stage 3, or other variants of that. Okay. Mary, it's your method of analysis will be guided by your research question or questions. So it's not that you have to do this, that, or the other. It's about your research question. I guess the only thing I'd say about that is to be a little bit cautious about mixed methods. And some students do mixed methods. I would certainly not advise doing a mixed method study in stage 1. It'll be really stressful and you won't have enough time. Occasionally, some students do some form of mixed methods in stage 3. Again, I wouldn't tend to recommend it just because of the time factor, but it's not impossible. Okay, maybe we're about there, Hannah. Last chance for a question, perhaps. Oh, I can't hear you, Hannah. That's strange. Don't know why I can't hear you, but I can't hear you. Great, thank you, Hannah, and thanks very much for coming, everyone, and look forward to seeing you all in September. Okay, bye now.